Hello students. Well, here we are again on a video going through lesson 20, just starting off that first session there on page 421. We're going to be talking about simple interest rates, those are percentages, and then also talk about some markups, markdowns, tax tips, commissions, and so on and so forth. Just kind of an introduction to those things, and then over the next sessions we'll actually look at multi-step percent problems that involve all of those words, markups and markdowns. So on page 421, you'll see the try it. What I'd like you to do is give this a read and pause the video and take about 2 or 3 minutes to try to figure out how many students are in the band this year based off of what we see here on this problem. So go ahead, pause that video, give it a shot. Okay, hopefully you did that and you're just coming back now to see how you did. Otherwise, you're bad student. All right, it says last year a middle school band had 80 students. This year, the band has 120% of that number of students. How many students are in the band? Well, a couple ways to do this. You can actually kind of think of this as 120%. This 120%, you can actually think of this as taking the original 100% of the students plus an additional 20%. Right, of what students there were to begin with. And so we're actually seeing a growth in students. Hopefully you caught on to that. 100% of the band as of right now is 80 students, right? The question now is what is 20% of that 80? So we can figure out, well, the 20%, if we can add the 100% plus 20%, we'll have a total of 120%. It's not too bad to find 20% of a number. You could set this up as, I don't know what 20% of 80 is, right? But we do know that 20% can be written as 20 over 100. And in your last video, in your last lesson, you actually talked about how to solve these. You can actually cross multiply to set up a new equation. For instance, 80 times 20, right? Well, that's going to give me 1,600. And then over here, x times 100, which is 100x. So now we can figure out what that 20% is simply by isolating that variable x. And the way that we go about that is by getting rid of its coefficient 100 by dividing. And if you type that into your calculator, if you're not sure what it is, you'll see that x comes out to be 16. And so what we have there is 100% of the students was 80 students, and then 20% of that is 16 students. And that gives us a total of 96 students in the band after it grows by 20%. So it's kind of weird to talk about that. It's growing by 20%, but now it has 120% of the original band members. Okay. And that kind of answers this question number 1, so go ahead and put your answer there if you haven't already. Remember to pause the video whenever you're taking these notes. Don't just copy and let my voice kind of float off into the ether. You want to make sure you're copying all these notes down and then pushing play again, okay? All right, moving back up here, we're going to be on the next page. You can probably find this. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. It says to look ahead. And it kind of just went over what we just talked about here, right? We can think of 120% as 100% plus 20%, but we can also think of 80% as actually taking the original 100% and subtracting 20%, okay? And a lot of real-world problems use percents. One of the biggest ones is simple interest rates, okay? Simple interest is very basic interest, but interest rates are all over the place right now, and you probably heard a lot of people talk about them. But there is a formula for simple interest. Simply this. So you can kind of see here that I equals PRT, that's interest equals principal times rate times time. And the formula shows that the amount of interest I is based on the principal P, the interest rate R, and the time that you borrow or invest the money for T. All right, so the principal is just the starting amount. That's how much money you'll be borrowing or putting in. The rate is a percent written as a decimal, So if we're given a percent as a rate, then we need to convert that over to a decimal by moving the decimal over twice. And then for simple interest rate, time is often measured in years. So let's take a look at an example here. So suppose you borrow $300 at a yearly or annual simple interest rate of 3.4% for 3 years. What values would you use for P, R, and T? Well, we don't have to solve anything here, but we're solving for interest rate, which is P times R times T. P would be your principal. That would be your $300 in this case. Your R, your rate, is not 3.14%. 3.4%, there we need to move that decimal over twice, once, twice. 0 would go here. So my rate is actually going to be 0.034. Remember that we need to convert it to a decimal. And then lastly, T, time. Well, how many times is this going to be getting interest, right? Well, it's going to be getting interest annually, once a year. Well, for how many years? 3 years. So how many times is that interest going to hit? 3 times. Because it's once a year for 3 years. So we could set this up and actually solve what our interest is going to be by plugging this into a calculator. 300 times 0.034 times 3. Now give you your interest that you'll have to pay on that. All right? Something very similar here in B. Remember that we need to convert all rates as a percent, written as a decimal, right? It says suppose you borrow $400 at a yearly simple interest rate of 3% for 3 months. You notice here we're not borrowing for 3 years. We're borrowing for 3 months. Okay, we're not even borrowing for a year. So again, we have the principal. That's what we're borrowing in this case. That's going to be $400. Our rate, it says it's 3%, but 3% converted to a decimal, so 1, 2, is 0.03, like so. And now the tricky one, time. In this case, time isn't even going to be 1. The reason why is we are doing a yearly simple interest rate, but we're borrowing for 3 months. It's a yearly interest rate, which means it's going to be over the years how much it's going to gain, but we're only borrowing for 3 months. Well, how long is a year? A year is 12 months. So we're actually only borrowing 3 out of 12 of those months, right? Out of the year. So that's 3/12 of the year. This can reduce to 1/4. But here we could set up our simple interest formula, which you don't need to do, but you can if you'd like. That'd be 400 times your rate times time, which is 1/4. And I'll tell you how much interest you'll be paying. All right, C, some good old terminologies here. We got the word a markdown. A markdown is a decrease. It's a decrease in a cost of an item. So if you went to the store and something is on sale for, for $20, that's usually $30. It got marked down. That's a markdown, right? Something's on sale. A markup is what we don't like to see at the store, but that's when something increases in cost. Okay, we see a lot of things go up in price when inflation hits, right? Suppose a store puts an item on sale for 25% off. Is that an example of a markup or a markdown? Go ahead and write down your answer. If you're not sure if it's being marked off, if it's 25% off, that's a sale, which means it's a markdown. Often, when you buy something, you pay a percent of the price as a tax. That is a markup, right? So think of that as you go and the product is $10, but when you go to check out, there's more than it comes out to more than $10, right? That's a tax. It got marked up. Suppose the total amount you pay for an item includes a 7% tax. What percent of the price of the item will you pay? Well, we have to pay the original 100%, right, of the product. Plus, we have to pay an additional 7% of that product, which means we will be paying 107% of the original price. All right, many people give tips or gratuities for good services. Many salespeople earn a commission on their sales. Gratuities, commissions, all these words are just really a type of markup, but they're more of a, I got to choose to mark up this, right? Because they did such a great job. Okay, suppose Jason earns a 9% commission. Okay, well that's good. Commission is actually something you get when you sell. Like if you work in retail, if you sell an item, the business that you sold it for gives you a percentage of the item that you sold, right? Jason earns 9% commission on a $1,000 sell. How much is his commission? Well, in this case, we would just need to find out what is 9% of $1,000. We already know that 9,000%, there you go, 9% here. Let's see if I can scroll a little bit. There we go. 9% just is 9, and percent means over 100. And we have $1,000 here, and we just want to know what is 9% of 1,000. So really we're just trying to figure out what's this guy, right? It's going to be a smaller number than 1,000, and then you can just do your cross multiply. 9 times 1,000 is 9,000. 100 times x is 100x. Divide by 100 to get x alone, giving us x equals 90. You can kind of cross these out or put it in your calculator, right? Checking that. All right, so what does that mean? If x is 90, what were we solving for? Well, that means that 9% of $1,000 is $90. So when Jason sells this item for $1,000, the business gives him a bonus or a commission of $90 to his paycheck. Is it possible for a single price change to be both a markup and a markdown at the same time? I don't know. You give an answer. You explain your thinking here, okay? Pause the video and take like 1 or 2 minutes to write a couple sentences down. Can you mark up a price and mark down a price at the same time? All right, moving into our practice pages, we have some vocabulary. I'm going to let you fill out the vocab for percent. Go ahead and tell me what you think percent is. We did a little video on that yesterday. What do you know about percent so far? And then give me 3 examples of a percent. And then move on to number 2. Pause the video, give it a shot, and then come back here for the answer if you need to, okay? Isabel says that 0.02 can be expressed as 20%. So basically what Isabel's trying to say here is that 20% is equal to the decimal 0.02. That is the question. Is that true? Explain why or why not. Let's take a look. If we took 20% and converted it to a decimal, when we're converting numbers to decimals, we move the decimal to the left twice because we're technically dividing by 100, right? This is technically 20 over 100. That's what percent means, right? So if you were to type this into your calculator and convert it to a decimal, it would give you 0.2, or you can continue out to 0, but basically it takes where the decimal is and moves it to the left twice, right? So that's the question now. Is 0.20 the same thing as 0.02? No, that's not true. So definitely not. Now you just have to explain why. All right, number 3 here. Last year, a rapper performed 40 times. This year, the rapper performs 125% of that number of times. How many times does the rapper perform this year? Well, you can refer all the way back to what we started with on this one. All the way back up to the first problem that we looked at. When we're looking at 125% of an original number, we can think of that as saying I have 100% of the performances plus another 25%. What's 100%? Well, 100% was the 40 times this year. right? Or sorry, last year. And now we need to add on an additional 25% of that number. Well, what is 25% of 40? 25% just means 25 over 100. And we want 25% of 40, which is a smaller number than 40. So we should expect x here to be a little smaller. Do some cross multiplying. 40 times 25, and then set that equal to 100 times x. All right, and so 40 times 25 is 1,000. Again, use your calculators. I've got one here with me, you just don't see it. And then we just need to solve for x by dividing both sides by 100. Giving us x equals, because over here the hundreds cancel out, x equals 1,000 divided by 100 is 10. Oh, context again. What is 10? 10 is not our answer. 10 is the additional 25% of the performances. Originally, last year, he performed 40 times, plus the additional 10 times would give us 50 times. That gives us a total of 125%. So this year, the rapper performed 50 times. All right. There are other ways to solve this, and you can check your answer differently. For instance, one of the other ways that you could approach this problem is by taking the 125%, converting it to a decimal by moving the decimal over twice, which is 1.25, and then taking the times, right, 40 times, and timesing by 1.25. When you do that, you will also get 50. Now this method is shorter, but it doesn't really explain why we're multiplying by it, okay? We're doing that over here. We are multiplying when we do cross multiplication, but we kind of ignore the 100% and we just say, hey, that's already 40, and then we go and find 25%, right? Which is 0.25. This is really 1 plus 0.25, and that gives us the 1.25, which is what we multiply by. So this is a shorter method. If this makes sense, you can do that. But this way works. I'd highly recommend just kind of sticking with this because it breaks it down into the parts and makes it a little bit easier to explain. Anyway, my voice is giving out, so that's maybe why I'm not there today. Anyway, good luck. If you guys get done with this lesson and taking your notes, go ahead and grab take your Chromebooks and go to iReady and work on any interactive practices you're working on missing, not done yet, or work on my path, okay? Be good for everyone there, and I'll see you soon. Bye.